The air in the classroom smelled of ozone and chalk dust. The archivist placed the red-tabbed classified dossier flat onto the human's desk. Elara did not blink. She reached up, slowly pulled the thin-framed reading glasses from her face, and set them down directly on top of the kill order. He thought he understood what humans were capable of hiding. You will want to hear exactly how wrong he was. 3 standard shifts ago, the only danger the archivist faced was a paper cut from a misfiled transport requisition. The subterranean vault of the Lurathi Records Division smelled entirely of paper mildew and static charge. The environmental regulators maintained the humidity at exactly 31%. It was an optimal climate for the preservation of dead documents, but fundamentally hostile to anything with functioning lungs. He sat at his migration terminal, a cautious entity in a quiet bureaucracy, tasked with the mundane translation of physical ink into digital eternity. The archive's indexing system remained an archaic monument to inefficiency, relying on faded, color-coded tabs to categorize the lives of Academy staff. He considered it a profound institutional shame. Visiting humans often called it charming. Then came the red tab. A sharp click. The scanning opticals rejected the dossier. It possessed a physical seal, a manual lock forged from heavy polysteel, and it carried a weight that defied its mundane label. The inscription read simply, Elara V, occupation, tutor. 9 years. She taught children. The file said she could have taught armies. He knew Elara. Every cadet in the junior navigation theory track knew her. She was 38 planetary cycles old, possessed a voice as soft as spun glass, and moved through the academy corridors with a gentle, stooped grace. She wore thin-framed reading glasses that constantly slipped down the bridge of her nose. Her vision was biologically flawless. He knew this because her medical scans were pristine. When a colleague once asked about the spectacles, she smiled and said that children inherently trust adults who wear glasses. She placed them on her desk when grading. She rested them on her head when lecturing. They were the most visible thing about her, and, as the heavy dossier in his hands would soon prove, the absolute least true. He broke the physical seal because it was his job. He opened the binding. The documents inside were not lesson plans or pastoral care evaluations. They were operation logs filed under a different designation entirely. V. Marin. Page after page detailed 4,000 hours of active combat operations spread across 7 restricted orbital theaters. The ink outlined weapon certifications for volatile kinetic systems that the Lurathi Academy did not even possess the clearance to name, let alone teach. Tucked at the very back of the stack sat a decommission order, authorized and signed by a human general whose own name had been violently redacted with heavy black ink. His cranial plates began to compress. It is a biological response to sudden, overwhelming information overload, a localized pressure building at the base of the skull as the nervous system attempts to reject impossible data. He exhaled slowly, watching his own hands tremble as he typed the designation V. Marin into the cross-reference engine. The terminal screen blinked in the dim light. The processor word, querying the classified databases of 3 allied systems. It returned 4,211 exact matches. Then, the entire terminal locked. The screen went a dead, unyielding gray. He did not have the security clearance to read the results of his own search. He sat alone in the subterranean silence, staring at the physical employment record of a soft-spoken tutor alongside the classified kill order of a veteran operative. The biometrics were irrefutable. The retinal scans matched to the micrometer. The resting heartbeat was identical, logged at a calm, impossible 58 beats per minute. She didn't hide. She just stopped being the person the file described. He manually pulled Elara's standard academy employment record from the adjacent cabinet. He laid the crisp, unblemished sheets of her civilian life down on the steel desk, right next to the blood-soaked history of V. Marin. The contrast was physically nauseating. Her academy file showed 9 years of service, 0 disciplinary incidents, 0 security flags. Her annual evaluations consistently contained the same glowing phrase, stamped by senior faculty: exceeds standards in pastoral care. His cranial glands froze mid-secretion. For a Larafi, this sensation stalls the perception of time. Seconds stretch into sluggish, agonizing minutes. He read both files simultaneously, his eyes darting between the soft-spoken educator and the lethal ghost, entirely unable to reconcile the two realities existing within the same flesh. He turned back to the military dossier, his finger tracing a specialized training classification buried in the addendums: adaptive combat methodology. He did not know the term. He had to access an offline military encyclopedia just to understand the syntax. The definition appeared in stark, clinical text. It was a discipline that meant the operative was trained to utilize any environment, any circumstance, and any mundane object as a weapon of lethal force. His lower jaw folded inward, locking tightly against his throat. It was not a threat display. It was the involuntary, deeply biological defensive posture of prey, realizing a predator has been sleeping in its den. He thought about the red pen she used to correct star charts. He thought about the heavy, hardbound navigation textbooks she handed to students. He thought about the reading glasses. He searched for an explanation, diving into her physiological data. A clinical note regarding human biology surfaced from an allied zoology database. Human muscle memory, once heavily encoded at 4,000 hours of repetition, becomes a permanent architectural fixture of the nervous system. The motor patterns persist for life. She had not trained in 9 years. She did not need to. Her body remembered everything. She was a weapon, wrapped in a civilian uniform, grading papers on the 3rd floor. He accessed the archival security footage, typing with numb, clumsy digits. He pulled up a standard feed of Elara moving through the northern corridors during a busy transition period. The motion sensors lined the walls, calibrated to log the passage of every living entity in the facility for environmental regulation. He watched her walk. Then, he checked the sensor logs. The system did not register a footstep. The diagnostic array had categorized her passage merely as a localized air current. She had been walking below the structural detection threshold for 9 long years, residing inside a building packed with cutting-edge surveillance technology. He dug deeper into the system, his long digits cold against the glowing interface. He needed to understand the full scope of the infiltration. He pulled up her academic lesson plans from the past 9 years, cross-referencing them against the military methodologies outlined in the V. Marin file. What the Academy administration had officially classified as standard, entry-level navigation theory, the archivist now recognized through the terrifying lens of the classified dossier. The curriculum was a masterpiece of hidden utility. Her lectures on utilizing planetary gravitational wells for fuel efficiency were, in reality, advanced orbital evasion patterns designed to shake target locks. Her seminars on recognizing hazardous terrain signatures were perfectly disguised protocols for exploiting natural resource denial against pursuing hostile forces. Every single cadet who had passed her class over the last decade had graduated with highly applicable, lethal combat knowledge. Over 1,200 students had learned how to survive a mechanized war zone. None of them knew. He found a single, handwritten personal note attached to the very bottom of her decommission review. It was short, carrying a tone he could not quite parse, requesting reassignment to education. The reason provided was not physical injury, nor was it psychological trauma. Reason: prefer smaller casualties, like spelling errors, rather than fatalities. It was a deeply unsettling realization that the woman trusted to nurture the minds of the next generation was actually a dormant weapon of mass destruction who had simply decided she preferred correcting grammatical mistakes over orchestrating the violent deaths of enemy combatants. He could not leave the discrepancy unaddressed. The institutional risk was too severe. He requested a formal, in-person meeting. Standing in her classroom hours later, breathing in that same faint scent of ozone and chalk dust from his initial memory of the encounter, He finally understood the absolute gravity of the situation. He had placed the red-tabbed classified dossier flat onto the wood of her desk. She had removed her glasses and set them directly on top of the kill order. He waited for a frantic denial. He waited for a defensive threat display. She remained perfectly still. Muscle memory at 4,000 hours becomes architecture, Elara said. Her voice was just as soft as it was when she instructed children. It is not stored in my mind. It is stored in my tendons, my spine, my reflexes. The archivist stared at her hands. They were resting loosely on the edge of the desk, perfectly steady, betraying absolutely zero physiological stress. I could not forget if I tried, she continued, her gaze locking onto his wide, dark eyes. I did try. I couldn't. He tapped the heavy polysteel lock of the file. 1,200 cadets. 9 years. Every one of them can navigate an active combat zone, deny resources to a pursuing force, and exploit hostile terrain. And every single one of them thinks they simply learned standard navigation theory. Elara looked down at the desk. She reached forward, picked up the thin-framed reading glasses, and slid them casually back onto her face. The glass caught the harsh fluorescent light of the classroom, masking her eyes. The file is accurate, she said quietly. So is the tutor. On both. Not a disguise, just a different kind of armor. In the weeks that followed, the Lurathi Academy conducted a silent, highly classified internal review. The administrative council debated for 3 agonizing days, locked behind soundproof bulkheads. Ultimately, her curriculum remained completely unmodified. Her dual record was sealed once more, buried beneath layers of new cryptographic locks, and her security clearance was quietly upgraded to level 7. She was never told why. She never asked. The Records Division issued a quiet, sweeping internal mandate to all staff members. It stated that human personnel files must henceforth be treated as minimum baseline estimates, never complete biological summaries. The archivist himself was forced to submit an official report detailing his work for the cycle. He documented a routine file migration with 0 anomalies found. He filed the report under fiction. She didn't hide what she was. The soldier didn't disappear. The tutor simply grew around her, like bark around a blade. In the subterranean vault, the archive lights auto-dimmed as the last cabinet locked shut, leaving only the static hum of ancient documents. Somewhere, 2 floors above, Elara sat quietly at her desk, using a red pen to carefully correct a junior cadet star chart.